I trained my own replacement with a smile on my face. What nobody in that room knew was that I had been waiting for that exact moment for 6 months. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener when Mr. Dawson slid a folder across the table. He told me this was Trevor, my replacement, and that I would be training him starting Monday. No warning email. No conversation beforehand. No mention of severance. Just a folder, and a name. I looked at Trevor. 26, maybe 27, wearing a badge that still had the plastic protector on it. He gave me a small wave, like we were meeting at a company picnic instead of the end of my career there. I smiled and said, "Sure, happy to help him get up to speed." Mr. Dawson blinked. He had clearly rehearsed a version of this meeting where I pushed back, maybe asked about my benefits, maybe brought up the 11 years I had put into this department. Instead, I picked up the folder, thanked him for letting me know in person, and asked if Trevor wanted to start with the client accounts or the reporting systems first. The silence that followed lasted 3 full seconds too long. 6 months. That was how long I had known this meeting was coming, in one form or another. Not the date, not the name Trevor, but the shape of it. I had watched that shape build for 6 months, and I had used every single one of those months on something Mr. Dawson never once asked me about. That morning, before I even badged in through the front doors, I had already made one phone call. I hadn't told anyone yet who I called. By Wednesday my desk was gone. Not eliminated, just moved, to a narrow spot by the break room where the ice machine rattled every few minutes and the smell of microwaved lunches never fully cleared out. Facilities called it a space optimization. Nobody used that phrase to my face about anything else that week. My calendar started rejecting me from meetings I had run for 3 years. I would open my laptop in the morning and find a decline notice waiting, or worse, an invite that simply never came, for a call I only found out about because a coworker mentioned it in passing by the coffee station. I watched Trevor sit down with one of our largest clients that Thursday, pulling up an account history I had built line by line over 4 years, presenting the retention numbers as if he had produced them himself. Nobody in that room corrected him. Nobody in that room knew there was anything to correct. Mr. Dawson stopped by my desk on Friday afternoon, loud enough for the row behind me to hear. He said it was nice that I finally had some breathing room these days, said it with a smile, said maybe I could use the extra time to catch up on paperwork I had been putting off. I had never once missed a compliance deadline in 11 years. I told him I would look into it. He walked away pleased with himself. I opened my laptop and quietly documented the exchange in the same folder I had been building for 6 months, timestamped, word for word. That was when I heard Trevor 2 desks over, still on his headset with the client, asking someone off screen where the quarterly renewal figures actually lived, because the dashboard he had been shown wasn't matching what he was reading out loud. He laughed it off. Said something about still learning the tools. The client laughed too, the easy kind of laugh people give when they still trust the person across the screen. I sat there at my new desk by the ice machine and did not say a word. I had spent 11 years learning exactly which numbers in that dashboard meant something and which ones were decoration. Trevor had been in the building 6 days. The following Monday I logged into the internal system to pull a shipping report and found my title had already changed. Senior Operations Manager was gone. In its place was a generic label, Operations Support, the kind of title that gets you removed from distribution lists without anyone having to send a single email explaining why. I still had 6 days left on paper before my official end date. Nobody had told me my access would shrink before that date arrived. I noticed it first in the small things. A decision thread about next quarter's client renewals moved forward in a channel I was quietly no longer part of. A budget call happened without a calendar invite reaching me at all. I only found out it took place because I heard 2 people discussing it near the printer. Then came the email. Company-wide, sent by Mr. Dawson himself, announcing that the Whitmore account, the client I had personally managed for 4 years, the one I had rebuilt from near cancellation after a billing dispute in my 2nd year, was now officially under Trevor's ownership going forward. My name was not in that email. Not once. I asked for 5 minutes with Mr. Dawson that afternoon. He agreed, checked his watch twice before I even sat down. I asked him directly what was happening with my severance, since HR paperwork still listed it as pending review. He told me it was still being finalized, that these things take time, that legal wanted to make sure everything was, in his words, clean on their end. I asked what exactly needed to be clean about 11 years of employment with no disciplinary record. He didn't answer that. He said he'd loop back to me by end of week and stood up before I could ask anything else. I walked back to my desk by the ice machine and sat down slowly, the kind of slow you move when you're doing math in your head about health insurance and mortgage payments and how many weeks a person can survive on savings if things go the way they seem to be going. That was when the email came in. No name in the sender field I recognized. No subject line that explained anything. Just 4 short lines, professional, almost clinical, asking if I was available for a call the following morning regarding the matter I had reported. I read it twice. I closed my laptop without a word to anyone at my desk. I hadn't told a single person at that company who I had called 6 months ago. I still hadn't told them who was calling me back. My mind went back to a Tuesday nearly 7 months earlier, before any of this had a name or a face attached to it. I had been reviewing the Whitmore contract for a routine renewal and noticed something that didn't sit right, a billing category that had been quietly reclassified in a way that shaved thousands off what the client was technically owed, spread out so evenly across invoices that it would take someone who actually knew the account to notice it all. I brought it to Mr. Dawson in his office, printout in hand, and walked him through it line by line. He barely looked at the page. He said billing structure decisions came from a level above both of us now, said it kindly, almost like he was doing me a favor by not making me feel foolish for asking. He said that side of things really wasn't my department anymore. I remember standing there a second too long, waiting for him to look up again. He didn't. I said sure, no problem, and thanked him for his time. I did not raise it again with him after that day. Not once, not in a meeting, not in an email, not in passing by the coffee station. I didn't need to raise it with him. I had already decided, standing outside his office that afternoon, exactly who I was going to raise it with instead. I found out the real reason 2 days later, from Megan in accounts payable, who caught me alone by the vending machines and asked if I was doing okay in a tone that told me she already knew something I didn't. She said it carefully, like she'd been holding it for a while. She said Trevor was Mr. Dawson's nephew's college roommate, that Mr. Dawson had been trying to bring him onto the team for almost a year, and that my role becoming available wasn't really about budget cuts at all. It was about finally having a seat to put him in. I asked her if she was sure. She said she'd heard it straight from someone in HR who processed the paperwork, that there had never actually been a formal cost analysis done comparing my position to a new hire, despite what I'd been told in that first meeting. I thanked her for telling me. I meant it. I also felt something shift in my chest that had nothing to do with the job itself anymore. 11 years, and it had never been about performance. It had been about who Mr. Dawson wanted at that table. My last scheduled day was set for that Friday. Trevor found out somehow, and made a point of mentioning it in the open floor area loud enough for half the team to hear, saying he figured he'd have the department running smoothly on his own within a month, maybe less, once he got the hang of a few more systems. A couple people laughed. Not unkindly, just the reflexive kind of laugh people give when they don't know what else to do with an awkward comment. I smiled and said I was sure he'd do fine. I went back to my desk by the ice machine and sat there a long moment, hands flat on the desk, staring at nothing in particular. For the first time since that folder had landed in front of me, I genuinely didn't know if what I'd built over the last 6 months was going to be enough. Documentation was one thing. Being believed was another. Then, that Friday morning, before I'd even taken my coat off, a calendar invite appeared in my inbox. It came from an outside law firm, one I didn't recognize by name, addressed to both myself and Mr. Dawson, scheduled for that same afternoon. The subject line gave nothing away. I sat there looking at it for a full minute before I picked up my coffee, hands steadier than I expected them to be, and went to find out exactly what Mr. Dawson thought this meeting was going to be about. The conference room on the 4th floor had glass walls, the kind everyone in that building could see through but nobody ever really looked into, and when I walked in I found 2 people already seated who didn't work for the company at all. One introduced herself as outside counsel for the firm. The other, a man with a laptop already open and a quiet, methodical way of speaking, said he'd been assigned to review a matter that had been reported several months earlier regarding billing practices on a specific client account. Mr. Dawson sat down across from me, still under the impression, I think, that this was somehow about my departure paperwork. The investigator asked me to confirm a date. It was the same Tuesday I had stood in Mr. Dawson's office with a printout in my hand, the same day he'd told me billing structure wasn't my department anymore. I confirmed it. I also confirmed that after that conversation, I had submitted a formal report to a state regulatory contact myself, with the original invoices, the reclassified billing codes, and a timeline showing exactly when the changes had been made and by whom. Mr. Dawson's expression shifted in a way I hadn't seen from him before, not annoyance, something closer to the floor moving slightly under his chair. The cryptic email from weeks earlier made sense to me now in a way it hadn't before. It hadn't been a mistake or spam filtered oddly into my inbox. It had been the investigator, reaching out to schedule exactly this conversation. I hadn't been quiet all those months because I had nothing left to say. I had been quiet because everything I needed to say was already written down, dated, and sitting with someone whose job it was to actually listen. The investigator thanked me for my time and said the review would continue. He asked Mr. Dawson to remain behind. I stepped out into the hallway, and through the glass wall I watched Mr. Dawson's phone buzz twice on the table in front of him while he sat there, not moving to answer it. Later that afternoon, a company-wide message went out that Mr. Dawson had been called into an unscheduled meeting with senior leadership and legal. No reason was given to the team. By Monday morning the whole floor was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that comes from a dozen people pretending to work while actually watching each other for reactions. Word moved fast even without an official explanation. Someone in accounting mentioned that Mr. Dawson had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the review. Nobody used the word suspended out loud, but everyone understood that was what it meant. Trevor was pulled into a separate meeting with the investigator that same afternoon, one that apparently didn't go the way he expected. I heard through the usual channels that he struggled to answer basic questions about the Whitmore account, the one with his name now attached to it in every system, because he genuinely didn't know the contract history well enough to explain it. He hadn't built it. He'd only been handed it. I wasn't in that room, so I can't say exactly how it went. I can only say that by Tuesday, Trevor stopped mentioning anything about running the department solo. That was also the day I got a call, not from Mr. Dawson, not from HR, but from someone 2 levels above him in the company, someone I had spoken to maybe twice in 11 years. She said she wanted to talk through my departure again, given everything that had come up. She used the word reconsider a few times, though never quite the word rehire. She asked what it would take to resolve things cleanly on both sides, given the documentation I had, given the ongoing review, given how exposed the company now was if this became a larger legal matter than a quiet internal one. I asked her directly if this was about doing right by me or about limiting what I might do next. She paused just long enough to answer the question without saying a word. Then she named a severance figure, more than double what had originally been mentioned to me in that first meeting with the folder and Trevor's plastic-covered badge. She said they wanted my answer by the end of the week. I thanked her for the call. I told her I needed time to think it over, and that I would be in touch with my own answer once I had reviewed everything properly. I hung up the phone and sat there at my desk by the ice machine for a long moment, the number she'd given me still sitting in my notebook where I'd written it down without meaning to. It was a good number. It still wasn't the thing I actually wanted from any of this. I called back that Friday, not with a yes, but with a list. I told her the severance number was a good starting point, but that money alone wasn't going to resolve this for me. I wanted something in writing, something formal, correcting my role and my contributions in the company's internal records, the same records that had quietly stripped my title before my last day had even arrived. She asked what exactly that would look like. I told her I wanted written confirmation that I had built and managed the Whitmore account for 4 years, that the retention numbers presented under someone else's name belonged to my work, and that my departure would be documented as a mutual resolution, not a performance-based exit. I wanted it signed by someone with actual authority to put it in the file. There was a pause on the line, then she said she'd need to run it by legal, given everything else already in motion. She called back 2 days later and said yes. Trevor lasted a little over a month after that in the role he'd been handed. Without me there to quietly keep the account running underneath him, and with leadership now watching that account closely, he was moved into a junior support position on a different team, the kind of reassignment that gets announced quietly on a Friday afternoon with no explanation attached. Mr. Dawson wasn't fired, at least not that I ever heard directly. But he never held the same weight in that building again. People who used to laugh at his jokes in meetings stopped laughing quite so easily. His name stopped coming up in conversations about promotions or new initiatives. I didn't see either of them again after I left. Months later, I ran into Megan at a coffee shop a few blocks from the old office, both of us waiting on the same order at the counter. We talked for a few minutes, the easy kind of catching up people do when enough time has passed that it doesn't sting anymore. Then she got quiet for a second, looked at me a little differently, and asked the question I could tell she'd been holding on to since the day everything unraveled. She asked if I had planned all of it from the very beginning. I thought about it for a second before I answered her, turning my coffee cup slowly on the counter. I told her no, not really, not in the way she meant. I hadn't sat down that first week and mapped out exactly how it would end. I didn't know Mr. Dawson would be pulled into that meeting, or that Trevor would end up somewhere else entirely, or that a company would ever call me back offering more than they'd once been willing to give me for 11 years of work. What I did know, I told her, was that I wasn't going to let a folder and a fake budget conversation be the last word on all that time. She asked what that meant, practically speaking. I told her it meant that when something didn't sit right, back on that Tuesday in Mr. Dawson's office, I didn't argue about it in the moment. I wrote it down instead, and I made sure it reached someone whose job it was to actually look into it. After that, I just kept doing my work, kept my composure, and waited to see what happened next. She nodded slowly, like that answer settled something for her, or maybe opened up something new to think about instead. I never raised my voice once through any of it. Not in that first meeting, not at my old desk by the ice machine, not in the room with the investigator. I didn't need to. The paperwork did the part one would have had to shout to explain, and it did it better than shouting ever could have. That was the part nobody in that building saw coming. Not that I had a plan. Just that I refused to disappear quietly, and I made sure the truth had somewhere solid to land when it was ready. So here's what I keep coming back to when I think about that folder, and that smile, and that Monday morning. Would you have smiled and said yes too? Or would you have already been building your exit?